In this tutorial, we are building a landing page for your SaaS, and by the end of it, you'd have this modern and responsive page build that also contains most common components for landing pages. So starting off with the hero section where we have a callout buttons, a header for your product, and also like this is where the demo image goes. Then we have this slider for all the partners or customers, followed by a roadmap of any like changes or news you want to share, as well as showcasing the top features. Then we have testimonials, which contains user name, image, and the testimonial review from an user. And then finally, there's like a subscription, different kinds of plans, and like a selecting option. So that's the application. We also have this navigation menu that goes into different sections. And as I mentioned, this is a responsive website. So all the components are also optimized for the mobile, and we even have a mobile menu. It's built with React and Tailwind, and without further ado, let's get right into the coding. Okay, we're gonna get started with creating a React app, and we'll create it using Vite. Vite is basically a build tool that provides a dev server using which we can run our app locally, and also then we have a build command that we can bundle our app for the deployment. So let's use their command. There's an option to just create app without indicating which template we're using, but in this case we're doing React, so let's use this command and replace it with React. I can also here change the name of the app and name it, for example, SAAS landing page for tutorial. Once we press enter, this will create like a project folder which we have to navigate into. So let's cd into that. After that, next step is installing the dependencies, which is done by the command npm install. And this command I'm running in the terminal. And let's open up the project in VS Code. Okay, here I'm gonna move on to using the terminal by VS Code and run the start command, which is npm run dev. This would start up our application at localhost, and that's the number. We can just command click, and it will open up in our browser. So that's our app, and this sample page, which we can edit at app.jsx. So let's open that up and examine. So we have just a header, a button for count, and then some text. As I mentioned, we're going to be using Tailwind, so let's install that as well. So we already created this project, so we're gonna skip this step, but let's proceed on the part where we install. I'm gonna close this out, open terminal one more time, new window, and this is where I paste the install command. Also, once that's ready, we need the initialization command, which is going to like set up Tailwind and create these configuration files. Next step is to modify this configuration file. So let's navigate to Tailwind config.js. So that would be in the root of the project, and update this line for the content. So this indicates basically on what files it should run the Tailwind on. Then we need to go to our main CSS file and add this components, and that would be here. Right, we have that at the top, and we can actually remove the rest of the code here. I don't think we're going to be needing this. All right, let's save that. We're already running the app, and let's test it out, make sure the Tailwind is configured properly. So I'm gonna go ahead in the app.jsx file, and let's remove all this extra code here. The only thing that I'm going to leave is this text, and if we add here text, for example, 3XL, and then let's do uppercase. Okay, let's rerun the application. And we see that the text has been updated. Okay, now as a first part, we're going to build out this header that's going to show up at the top of the application and have some like menu items and buttons in there, as well as a logo. And before I get started into writing code for the header, let's go over the folder structure. So right now, this is just almost like an empty project, so there's not much going on here, but things to know is that the node modules is where all the third-party node modules code of it is installed. Then we have a public folder where we add all the assets that we want to be publicly available. Right now, I believe this is just the SVG file for the logo. As for the source, that's where our code goes. So right now we have app main.js. This is like a wrapper for the whole application, so like the main file, so to say, and then app.jsx is our like homepage index file. As for the assets, these assets are, you can store icons, files, images here as well, but what's different from the public folder and then this asset folder is that anytime you want to use an image or icon from the asset, you would have to import that like it's shown, for example, here. Well, versus the public folder is publicly available, so you can just call the URL. Anyways, so that's the short overview, and let's get started. Usually what I do for components is in the source folder, I create a new folder and I name it components. Then inside the component, I'll create a new file and then give the name of that specific component. So we have a navbar in this case, and let's start creating the component. So that would be constant navbar that equals to we're gonna return, let's just return a text saying that this is navbar, and we do an export default name of the component. Okay, so we have this and we want this to show up here. What we do for that is go back to app.jsx and import our component. So first comes the component name. Since this is an export default, we don't need this like curly brackets. And then comes the path of the file, which is in components and navbar. And the name is incorrect. It should be that. Okay, once we have the import, let's also remove this and add that in here. We save that and we see the text show up here. Okay, let's have an outer div and add another div here where we're going to be storing all the items, and let's do nav here and list the menu items. So for the list, we are going to use unordered list. And as for the list items, we can just say li followed by an a tag, which is for like the links. So href home, and instead of home, I'm going to change it to about us. So if I save this now, we have this text, and if we hover over, we're gonna see that this is a link, and in the browser on the left bottom corner, you're gonna see like the URL of the link. Okay, we can change now the styling of this by adding a class name, and the class name would be, let's say if we want to change the text, it would be text gray 600. So if we hover over here, I have a Tailwind extension installed on my VS Code, so it tells me like what what does this class name do? So if you're wondering where they get this Tailwind Gray 600 form, this is a utility class. Basically, Tailwind defines the styles, and if you want to apply that specific styles, you just have to name your classes according to their guidelines. This can be found or on their documentation where they have different sections. For example, here for the text decoration colors, and we see all these options, or just the text colors. There's also a lot of different kinds of styling, for example, flex, grid, different layouts, and we're gonna explore those and add those to the project as we go along. So back to our code, so that this one changed the color. Let's create about two more items, so we can just copy this over and change the text. This one would be for our features section, and we're gonna have one more that is pricing. Okay, so this text is great, but the layout of this doesn't really look good. We would want this to be on the same line. So that's why we're gonna make this a flex component. So let's go to the parent of the list items, which is this UL tag, and add a class name. To make a div a flex display flex, we can just add a flex class name, and we can indicate the direction of flex by saying flex row. And we also want a space between items. So if I save this right now, we're going to see that they're all kind of lined up together. So instead of this, let's add, instead of having that kind of effect, let's add space x4. Let's save this. So it would set the spacing on our horizontal level, and doing some padding around this unordered list. Okay, so at the end of this, I'm gonna minimize the nav tag, and I'll add another div. This would be specifically for the buttons. The buttons would also serve as kind of a links, and this would be login. And let's add another one for sign up. Saving this, we see that since this previous div takes up the whole row, this show up on technically a separate row. And let's change that behavior and instead have this stretch out and all the way to the end on the right side. So for that, we're gonna make the parent of these two containers, which is this one, also flex. So class name, this equals to flex, and have items align in the center. Also, as for the justify content, let's do between, so this links move to the right side. Okay, now updating the styling of these two buttons, let's add a class name, and for the classes, we're gonna do background black, some padding on the sides as well as top and the bottom. For the round borders, let's make rounded, so MD for medium, and text color would be white. So that looks good, and since this is a button, let's do cursor pointer. We're gonna have the same styling on the other button. Only difference is that we want some space, so I'm gonna add a margin on the left side. We're still going to add some more styling changes, but besides that, another missing piece is we wanna add the logo on the left side. So for that, what I'm going to do is in the assets folder, I'm gonna drop in an image that I have for the logo. So that's what the image looks like. And as I mentioned, since this is on a assets folder, we need to import the logo. So we do import, we can name this whatever we want. I'll do logo URL, and from then we need to indicate the path to the assets folder and name of the image. So mine is .png. Let's import that and add an image before in the nav. So adding another div, then we have an image tag. In the source is where we indicate the logo URL that we just imported. Then we have an alt text to describe what the image is about. As for the class name, this is defining height. So I'm going to change this and do height 20 instead. And the width of this, my image is a square, so the width would be of the same value, 20 as well. So, okay, that's how that is looking like. Next thing that you notice is that this items here are too spread out, so we want to have them a little bit more closer to the middle, so restrict the width of this inner div inside our header. So if we were to examine here, we have elements. If we open up an inspector on our browser, for some reason it's not letting me select elements, I don't know why. So that's our main div, and that's our item. So let's add another div that would we can set the max width to it, and yeah, this would go about this one, and div would be class name. Let's do margin auto so that it's always centered. Width full by default, but then if the screen is too long, then maximum width would be screen and then Excel value. Let's add a padding on the top, 2.5. As well for larger screens, we're gonna do 20, and we're gonna make this relative because we're gonna add another class, and I'm missing an ending div here. Okay, we're gonna add another div that would be positioned according to this. All right, and once we have more components on this page and we scroll, we want this to be sticky. So to achieve this effect, we can use the sticky positioning. So styling the main div, we're gonna do sticky, and then once we set the position to sticky, we have to indicate numbers in terms of where it's supposed to position. So for that, I'll set the inset x to 0. So that means on the left and right, we're gonna have both 0 values, as well as for the top, that would be 0. So it would be all the way at the top always. And let's do width that full. As for the index, we want it to always cover what else is visible. So we're gonna set that to high. It would be 30, and yeah. So nothing really changes right now because we don't have more content. What I also noticed here is that there's styling coming from most likely index or app CSS. So I'm gonna also select all of this and delete, save the changes. And now I guess it was setting some padding, so the header has moved up. We don't have the styling anymore, and that looks better. Okay, now let's move on to the hero section. We're gonna come back to the header, add styling, for example, animations and transitions as we scroll through the page, and a mobile menu. As for the header, I will also create a new component, for the hero section. Give it a name, hero section, creating a component. Let's name that as well, and let's do export default. Before we start writing code, let's import that from the app so we can see the changes. And I'm going to remove this state definition because we don't need that, and import All right, let's add that below the navigation bar. So, okay, that is here. I will change the text to something like launch your SAAS. And then I'm gonna add a break because I want the next text to start in a new line. And I also want the next text to have like a different styling. So that's why I'm creating a span, and I'll do more text here. Okay, and if we save this, this would be just a text on 2 lines. Let's add, instead of a div here, I'm gonna actually use a section tag. And inside the class name, what I want to add is the text that should be centered. Also a large margin on the top, and I'll make it flex direction column. Okay, so that's our text here. Now let's start, it's positioned as we wanted. Now let's start updating the styling of the text itself. And to update the font size, that would be for Excel. As for the font type, let's do extra bold. This leading is for the line height, and we are going to set it to a custom number. And in Tailwind, you can do custom numbers by adding brackets. Text color would be black, and on like larger screens, let's do text 6XL, as well as update the line height. And okay, let's save this, take a look at the changes. That looks good. Okay, so this one got updated. Actually, we do need the same styling for this as well, so I'm gonna move this instead. And the only difference would be that the color of this will make it gradient, so it changes as we move on the text from right to left. And to do that, we can set the background to gradient. So background gradient, and then we indicate to direction. So we're going to do on the right side, and it sets the background image to linear gradient, and then passes the gradient stops value. As you can see, it's like a variable. And the way we indicate what those values to be is from using from and then to. So from followed by, we select the color from the color palette Tailwind provides. So I'll do pink 500, and then we can also indicate in between colors. So that would be using via, and this I'll do indigo 600. So if I save this, now we're gonna see that this is the background. So not ideal, but we're gonna get there. So let's do 2 pink 500. What this is gonna do is add that third color, so it's gonna end with pink itself. So now instead of having this as a background, we want the text to be inside the text. So for that, we do back clip text. All right, and if we make text color transparent, this is what we're going to see. So it basically like cuts out, and we are seeing text as a transparent. Okay, so now let's add a sub, basically header inside of this. For that, we're gonna do h2 text, which basically I generated with ChatGPT. I gave a few descriptions, and a lot of the content here that we're gonna see, it's probably written from there. So let's add a margin at the top, text gray. This I usually make this like subheader text lighter, just to follow like the best practices. And on the larger screens, we're gonna make this XL. Okay, that looks nice. Let's add like 2 buttons here below the subheader. So for that, let's create a new div, and the first href, let's do get started, and the second one learn more. That sounds good. So yeah, let's add some styling for that one. And for the class names, we don't need this. We're gonna do rounded full, so it would be like a round button. Let's center it by default and set max width to fit the content. We're gonna add a border to it, some padding on the top and on the sides, and then we have a smaller padding for top and the bottom. As for the text, it would be small. Font, let's do medium, add some shadow, small. Let's see how so far how it's looking like. So we have that shadow, the border. Let's change the color of the border and instead do black. And same for, maybe we can keep one button white and one button black. So this one, and let's do text white. I don't know why it keeps suggesting margin at the top to be 8, but I not want that. And let's add some outline. So for hover state, we do hover and then colon ring gray, maybe like 200. Oh, and then we need hover ring 4. Okay. Maybe that's too big. Let's do 2. And I'll make this darker, 700. Okay, that's too dark, 400 it is. All right, let's copy this class name for this one, but this time we're going to change the background color, set that to white, the text color to black instead, as well as the border. Let's do gray and lighter gray, something like 200, and I think the ring color looks better like this. Okay, as for the parent container, we can make this flex so it the alignment shows up better. So first I'm gonna do margin auto, margin at the top 5, so it applies to both buttons. Display would be flex, max width would be fit, and let's add some space in between our buttons. So that's that. I'm going to add like a demo image below this components that we just added. So I'll paste the image here. This image I constructed using Canva, so I like put some pieces together, and let's import the URL of it. So this would be import demo URL from, I don't know why it's suggesting that. So yeah, demo PNG, and adding that as a last div. Class name equals to, let's do margin top 5, items center, and justify center as well. I don't think we need flex image, source equals demo URL, and then margin auto. So yeah, we can have this, but what I'm also going to add is the height. I want to show this as 500 pixels. And let's make it this on the larger one, and by default, so on smaller screens, let's do 300. Okay, so now as you see here, like this text is too wide, and ideally we would have something like a more padding here. So for that, I'm gonna add like a container class to all the items in the like the sections. So that would be class name container. And what this does is basically sets the maximum width. So anything inside here, you would have this. Oh, I did not add the closing tag. Okay. Okay, and by default, I mean, it's not by default, but we have to add margin auto. And let's do maximum height instead of just setting the height. So as a background for this hero section, I'm going to add this mesh background, which I generated on the site that I will link in the description if you want to generate maybe a mesh that's slightly different or has a slightly different like pattern. And so yeah, I'm gonna paste it in the public folder, and also I'm gonna link the assets in the description, so if you want to use the exact same assets, it would be there. The grid is another one SVG that I'm going to be adding here. This one I also generated from the same site, and what I'm going to do here is they would always remain on this part, so even if we scroll to see more content, this would be showing up as a background. And for that I will create a new div so that would remain on the screen. And for that let's just add images first and then do the styling. So source, since these are in the public folder, we don't need to import them, we can just indicate the path. So public folder, it's just accessed like this, and the name of the file. Okay, so let's just close this, and for the other one we're gonna add that as a background image instead. So div class name. So to add the background image, and you want to use URL, you can do this like custom value brackets, and then followed by the path to the file. So this is grid.svg. Okay. Cool, let's just save that and see how it's looking like. We are going to make this position absolute, so it would not actually be followed by this. And let's do that. So we're gonna set the class names for this one, which would be screen. Minimum height would be screen. It would be a fixed position. And the index would be low because we want this to always be behind and the rest of the content to be showing up first. Position, let's do flex. We're just gonna like center stuff. So justify center, add some padding and a large padding for top and the bottom. As for like pointer event none, we don't want it to have any like cursor pointer or anything. So that's how this is. We're going to increase the z-index of the other stuff so it shows up here, as well as decrease the opacity for this, because right now it's almost impossible to see things when it's so bright. So for that I'm going to do opacity 25, so that sets it to like 25%, and then when opacity is like 100%, that's where like the items show up fully. But that didn't seem to work. And let's create a new div here and wrap our other items on the page. And for this one I'm gonna do class name relative, and then we'll do z-index higher. Okay, let's also, so that was for the grid, which actually it's not showing up. So I'm gonna have to check why is that, but also let's change the opacity for this one. I'll add a class name. And let's actually increase this, maybe that's why, okay. And both of these positions would be absolute, inset set to 0, and same for this one, although it would be like bottom 1. As for the height, let's do 600 pixels. Okay, so now it's visible. I guess it was like the positioning, that's why it was not showing up. And I want to do this one show up first, mesh, and then come the grid. But since we have 20, so grid is like 10, we can set this one to, we can do 0, and then this could be 10. Yeah, but because the opacity is so low for the mesh, you can still see the grid, but that's okay. And also let's not have like grid all the way through. Let's like let it like fade away towards the end. So we are basically gonna have like this circle around it and then fades away to like white. And then to achieve that, we can use the blur, we can combine the blur effect, so it like gradually fades away with the gradient effect. So for gradient colors, we either set transparent on white, so we get that like that kind of background. We don't actually need like an actual photo that looks like that. Let's add the div below our mesh, and here we're gonna set the class name. So this would be background gradient to C, and as you notice in the list here, C doesn't exist because we are going to add that like customized class name in Tailwind, our configuration, and after this I'll show you guys how to do that. So this would be from transparent, and it would be via transparent, and in the center we're gonna have white. This also position would be absolute, inset 0, and the index, let's also set that to 20. Okay, now how do we add custom classes in Tailwind? We go to Tailwind configuration. Inside the configuration, we go to theme, extend, and we define what kind of like attribute this class would be for, and then the name of the custom. So this is BG and then followed by this, and what this is supposed to do. So we're gonna use radial gradient to get that circular effect, and it does provide some default values, but since we want to use like the from and via that we just defined, let's just do variable and then Tailwind gradient stop, so it picks it up from here. Okay, now let's see, we should already have that, how it looks like, and as you can see, it kind of like fades away towards the end. Like in the corner, we already have this completely white, and then it has like a circular shape. Let's add a tag here above the main header. It's usually used to share like some new information about the product, or could be a version. And for the tag, I'll create a separate component that I'm gonna later on import into the hero section. So it will be called tag, and this will take in like a children type of prop. So we can basically add any JSX inside, and it should return that, and wrapped into, instead of a span, I'm gonna do a div, and we'll add also class names for the styling. Let's export default first. Save that. I'm going to close this out, go back to the hero section, import that before we add some styling. It is in, oh, I had from twice. So what we're gonna have inside tag is some text and maybe an icon that would be an arrow. And as I said, we're gonna add that below H1. So let's do tag instead of this one. I'll do a div. Then we're gonna have a span. Let's do something like next and maybe next and version number. We're going to use this icon library called Lucid, and they have like a React version first, which we need to install inside our project. So if we go to Lucid React here, we're gonna see the command for the installation. We are going to copy that, add it into our, paste it into our terminal. So let's start installing that. And after we can browse their icons from this page right here. So I'm gonna type it in the type of icon that I'm looking on, which is right. And this one seems good. Let's copy just the component name. Once we have the component name and the library has been installed, we can inside this curly brackets paste the name, and it would be coming from Lucid React. So in with this, once we just use the name of the component, so it returns just the React component. But what we also can do for customizing, let's first take a look at how it looks, is use Tailwind. So that's the great benefit of using this library. So we have this text here and this icon here. Now I'm going to try to put this more to the side, and we're going to align this so they're right next to each other. Let's add a class name to the parent div. We'll do flex and items center, as well as when we hover over this, we want this to be cursor pointer, not the text. Okay, as for the icon, we can set the width and height just like we would do with any other components using Tailwind. So this would be width and the height. We can also add a margin on the left side. Let's do 1 and change the color using text attribute, and I'll set that to indigo 300, and I'll also do overflow visible. Okay, let's save this and update the styling for the tag. So let's start with the text size. This would be XS, leading. As for the line height, we can set that to 5. Font medium, text color, we're gonna also do this indigo, but this would be darker than the icon, so changing it to 600. That's how it looks like. Now we're gonna add a background and make it more like shaped like a circle. So for background, indigo 400, but if we set this is too dark, so we're gonna set opacity of the background color to be 10. As for the circular shape, we'll do rounded full. Add some padding at the top and on the sides. On smaller screens, let's do, actually we don't need to have this hidden. Let's just do flex items center, and on the hover change the color of the background indigo 400 and increasing opacity to 20. The width for this, because we don't want this spreading through the whole row. So let's do fit, and by default center it, margin auto, and margin at the bottom so it has more space in between. Set that to 4. All right, that looks great. What we're doing next is building out a slider that'll show up below this demo image, and it would be displaying logos of partners. And for that, in the public folder, I'm going to paste this folder for the logos that I have for the partners. I'll close this out. So this is how it's looking like. It's a folder. I also created this logos using Canva, so just like different names, and it could be used for partners or your clients that you want to showcase any brands or names. And let's create a data component that would include the information that we're later on going to take it and display on this slider component that we're going to build out. So first, in the source folder, I'm going to go ahead and create the new folder for data. This is where we're going to store all this kind of like information that we need to use for our UI components. And let's do a new file. This would be partners.js. So export constant partners logo, and this would be an not an object, an array. It will contain, for every logo, we're gonna have fields like ID, which we need to make sure that's unique, because we'll use it as a key when we map out this things. I'm gonna do partner 1, and for the logo, we're gonna indicate image path. If they have an image hosted, you can also use their URL, but this is not what I have. The PNG. Okay, so let's do same for the others. Okay, so in total, oh wow, it did a lot. I only have 9, so I'm going to remove all the other ones, and that is our array. For the slider UI component, for the animation of those images sliding on repeatedly, we're going to use this library called Framer Motion, and this like sliding animation could be achieved using like pure CSS, but it would be a lot of CSS lines, and I also like using Framer Motion, and it helps me define variables, and also I can define some logic and reuse it in other different kinds of components. So yeah, that's the brief overview. Let's copy the install command. I'm gonna close this partners page. I will install the component and start creating the slider. That would be in components folder, slider.jsx. And let's import. So the function that we will be using is called motion. That's from Framer Motion. And next we have component definition. We are going to be taking in an images array, and that would be return. I'm gonna do export default, and for now let's just like map out the images, and once we map out the images, we're gonna make them like go rotate, right? So once we see all the images, we're gonna go back to the beginning of the array. But to have this smooth transition, what we can do is duplicate the images. So instead of having one array, same elements twice. And let's just, before we do any animations, create like a main div component and map them out. So this would be images array. Map, we take in the image, we take in the index, and then what we do is let's return a div, and inside here we need to indicate the key, which would be image.id, and display the image source equals to image URL, and alt text would be image dot we had a name instead. For the class name, let's do height full object contain, and the max width would be full. As for opacity, I'm gonna set it to 75. We don't want the full opacity. Okay, so we're not using motion yet. We're gonna go back to our main file and import both the images and the slider in here. Partners, logo from data partners, and slider from component slider. Okay, inside hero section, we can pass on this data to slider prop and see how that is looking like. So we have maybe incorrectly indicated. So, okay, instead of URL, it is a logo. And here we have all the logos showing up. Let's update the way they are being displayed. So I'm gonna create a new div around this map, and for the class name, we're gonna make it flex. And we can add styling on this inner div. So this is how, I guess, flex looking like, but these are really small. So instead what we don't want the whole thing showing in a one row. We want this to be kind of shifting and few of the logos showing up at the same time. So let's do height set to full, and flex shrink, we're gonna set it to 0, so they take up the full space. Now, yes, we have this overflow, that's how we want it to be, and let's make the height is smaller, so this would follow the height of the main container, main div, so that would be here, adding a class name, and let's try something like 200 pixels. So that should change the height. We're also going to make it relative, overflow hidden, as well as centered and max width screen Excel. And for the images, let's add another class here. And for the images, let's add another class here. This would be also flex. Then we're gonna have items center, justify center, and height one more time, 200. Oh, I guess it escaped. Okay, let's do that. And okay, that looks better. Now we can, I don't know why this is selected. So over this overflow, also using frame or motion, once this is scrolled, we're gonna fix that, and this would have like a background, but let's finish working on the slider first. So yep, we can have this 4 logos showing up at the same time. As for the animation, once we want to make the div animated, we just have to add motion and that. So let's say we're animating this one right here. We're gonna do motion that div, and then we describe what kind of animation we're looking for inside animate. So this would be animate, and if you want to check the attributes, you can check the framer motion documentation. So we're going to have X starting off from 0%, and it would go up all the way to minus 100%. So X is like a X position, and then what kind of transition we are looking for. So if we do is linear, and then how long it's supposed to last, I'm going to do 15. And if it's supposed to repeat or not, we're going to set that to infinity. And I'm going to make a change here instead of image array, because image ID, using that as a key, that could be repeated since we have every element in our initial array twice. I'll change that to index, which is just going to start from 0 all the way to the end of the length of the images array. A bracket inside the string quotes, which shouldn't be here, it should be just minus 100%. So if we go over to the application, we're going to see that we have this sliding logos infinitely as we wanted to. The only thing is that we want this logos to kind of disappear, but right now it's like a hard cutoff. This line is very visible. So what instead we can do is once again apply kind of this like circular blur and blur it out using also opacity. And for that we're gonna add another div that's gonna create that effect, and this would go on, we can do above the motion div. This is not gonna be motion or animated, this would always stay there, and we'll make it absolute. This is relative, the parent div, so that's why we can set it relative to that, and inset would be 0. The index, I'll set it to 20, and let's use the before attribute. So also for before, here what we want is on the left side and on the right side to have this fade out effect. So starting with the before, we're gonna do left side first, and the right side would go in the after. Also left position 0, top position also 0, and the widths we can set it to 1, 4. Height would be full, and setting the gradient would be background gradient to the right side. Also, it would start from white to transparent, so then we're on the right. The more right we go, the more we're able to see the logos. This is width 1/4. Okay, so that's where it like fades out. And all right, let's do the same, and we can control the width. Let's say if we do 2/4, this would continue all the way through the halfway. So let's shift that back to 1/4 and do the same on the right side using the after attribute. So after also absolute. Basically same effect, just on an opposite side. Top 0 positioning to the left side. Height full, same width, 1/4. Also starting from white, continuing to transparent. Okay, if I'm not missing anything, this should also be on the right side. Now let's fix this overlay issue when we are scrolling through the page and update stylings based on if user has scrolled or not. And to detect that, we are going to use this hook provided by Framer Motion. It's called use scroll, and what it does is it basically provides us position on how much user has scrolled. So if scroll y is more than a 0, that it means that they have scrolled. And we're going to make this change going back to the navigation bar at the top here. I'm going to import this use scroll hook, and as well copy this on so we can track the page scroll. So if we were to console log scroll line right now, and let's describe what we're console logging. Cool, we go back here, open up a console, and does provide a motion value. And we can check the current is set to 0. And it has other functions as well. And you can check what is the value of current. That would be the value of y. And to track the changes in this one, let's instead use this hook. Also import the function as well. So now let's save that, and on the scroll change, every single time we're gonna get this value. Okay, so now we have the value. We can determine whether or not user has scrolled, and for that let's have a separate state. So I'm going to use state hook from React and create a new state named scrolled. So then we have set scrolled. By default this would be false, and let's say if latest is greater than 0, we set scrolled to true, and if set scroll doesn't already equal to true, because we don't want to be updating class updating state if it's already set to the correct value. And if another condition is if this is back to 0, we want to set scrolled back to false. All right, let's save this, and what we'll do on the scrolled is we're gonna add some kind of background here, also maybe a border, so we can easily differentiate different kinds of contents and what's header, what's not part of the header. And for that, let's first define those classes that we're gonna use in both cases, when the page hasn't been scrolled and when it has been scrolled. So I'll do default classes. And I'm going to set this to, yes, we do need a transition all, absolute, as well as inset 0. And we're going to do negative z index. And then we're going to have a navbar classes, which going to depend on this value right here. So if it's scrolled, we're gonna take default classes, and here let's add border at the bottom. Border color would be black, but with the 10% transparency. Background, let's add white, but also 75% opacity, and have some backdrop blur. The size of this would be large, so we can kind of see part of what's going on in the back, but not fully. And yep, that should be it for this one. And for the other one, we do want the background to be transparent. Now I should have closed this first. Let's take these classes and add this as a separate div, passing in the class name. Okay, so that's how it's looking like. We can see like there's other components that are being covered here, and if we scroll up, then this border goes away and kind of in a smooth way since we set some kind of transition. Okay, while we are at the navbar, let's also build out a mobile menu, which would be showing up when a user is on the mobile view. So that's how our navigation bar is looking like on the mobile, and that's not how we want to leave it. So first thing we'll do is we're gonna show the logo regardless, and these buttons we're gonna hide, and we're gonna move into the menu button, which could be expanded. All right, let's go over where we have navigation and this button. So for both of them, we're gonna do class name. It would be block, and let's pick like a medium. Actually, it would be hidden by default, and then on larger screens, it would show up as block. And doing the same for the other two. Okay, so now it's hidden, and I'll create a new component for the menu, mobile menu. So let's do new file. Creating a functional component. It does not take in any props, and let's return just div for first, where we're gonna have the other way around. So by default, this would be a block, and starting on the larger screens, it will not show up. Let's make this export default. And put that in the navigation bar. Right, so it is in the same component, and we're gonna add that in the end. So here, all the way on the right side. So, okay, this is how it is. If we were to exit this out, now we can make sure that it doesn't show up. Going back to the mobile view, here we're gonna have two different conditions. One is where this is open and closed. To track those conditions, we will use a state, importing the useState hook from React to create that state. And let's name that nav open, set nav open, and by default, this would be false. So let's take this and do a condition. So if we have a scenario where it's not open, then we're gonna display a button. So let's do this first. And on click of the button, we're going to update the state. So let's add a callback function here and nav open to true. And let's add an icon here that we can use, okay, when it's not open, and also let's browse the one for like closing it. And I think this one looks good from Lucid React. So we add that here, that is menu. And if we go back here and click this, this kind of disappears. So instead of null now, we can add the X icon that we just imported, and also on the on click, we want to set open to false. So if we do this, this gets updated. Cool, now let's display the links or like menu items that we want to show, and for that I'll create an array. First for the nav, let's do items, and this would be the same as we had in navbar, so that's like about us, features, and pricing. It would have a title and the URL. Features, pricing, okay. So instead of contact, let's do sign in. And a sign up. We're gonna take this and map it out when this is open. So it would go below here. Map item and a link of the item. The styling piece we're gonna fix. Let's make sure it just gets displayed first. So, okay. And since this is kind of part of Flex, it takes up all this space and we don't want that. So we're gonna make this div absolute instead. Left, let's do 0, width, let's do full, and from the top we can do the height of the header, which we can check, but I'll put this value. Okay, so it's not 44, maybe like 20. Cool, now let's add a background. White, we can do opacity 60 and add a backdrop. Blur large on this one as well. And let's do border at the bottom. And maybe top would be nice as well. Okay, so now for this items itself, let's do unordered list, and the key would be index for this one. Okay, let's do this one. Class name flex, flex column, some padding on the top and the bottom, and item center. Okay, this makes the page reload because we don't actually have that screen. And let's close this out. So that's how it's working. Next up, we're going to build a roadmap section, which we're going to place it after the partner slider. And that section would display like a milestones with 8 lines, and each milestone would have like a spot. So let's get started. We're gonna first create a milestone component. New file, milestone.jsx, constant milestone. So this would take actually 3 arguments. It would be title, description, and whether or not it is a list item. So this would be a boolean. Let's just return and display the data. Okay. And all right. So we're just displaying data first, and afterwards we're gonna update the styling and add that like point that I mentioned. All right. So for the roadmap itself, let's create a separate component. It probably makes sense if I took all the sections and put it also in separate folder inside components. That way I don't have to name all of them section in the end, but that's how we have right now. So creating a array. So in each component, we're going to have ID, then we have the name of the roadmap and the milestone and a description of what was achieved. So I think this is kind of too long. Let's do project kickoff and something like gathering. All right, so that's the first one. Okay, I'm going to accept this and see. So this looks good. Why is this? The spelling's wrong. Cool, let's create a component below our array. So roadmap section, we return a section component, section tag, and let's start with an H1 that's gonna say roadmap. Then we'll map out the item, so roadmap.map index, and then we're gonna display the milestone. So it would be key is index title equals roadmap item dot name, is it? Yeah. Description equals to description, and whether or not last item it is the last item, we check that by taking an index which starts at 0. So if index is at the length -1, then this is a last item. So we need to close this out and also export it. So once we do export, let's go back to app.jsx and import that here. All right, and I'm gonna add after the slider. Let's see how it looks like. So that's just like a plain list, and we can add styling now. Starting off with just the section styling, so that would be class name, max width, let's do 80. And by default, we're gonna center that. Moving on to our header, this would be font semi-bold, text 3XL. We're also going to center the text and add some margin at the bottom. All right, so for the milestone, no styling here, but we're gonna navigate to the component itself and update the styling here. So first the outer component, let's make this flex. And for the width, we're gonna set it to full. Next up, we have a inner component. So the way this is going to work is there will be two sections. One section on the right side would be where this text and description show up. And on the left side, it would be a line and like a marker for the milestone. So that one, let's start with the left side first. So this would be here. And we are going to have a component. I'm gonna move this outside of it. We're gonna create separately for this, but this one would be relative flex display direction column, and items would be center. Also height, let's set a fixed height to 32. So what we have here is a circle next. And it would be a basically empty div. It would just have like a background color. So let's set the index to, not negative, to 20, because the circle would be over the line. So background, I'm gonna set it to gradient, to bottom direction. And from pink 500 to indigo 500, so it matches the other gradients that we have. Fixed height and width, that is how we create circle when we add rounded So it's basically we take like a square and add border radius. Full flex shrink, let's do 0, and this one would also be relative. So if we see now, I wonder why it's not. Okay, so it's supposed to be here. Oh, I have gradient. Oh, it's supposed to be 2b. I was missing. Okay, so that's our circle. Let's add a kind of like a blur here as well for just the effect. So that would be the, once again, background gradient to the bottom, and same thing from pink 500 to indigo 500. The only, oh, I misspelled this again. The only difference would be the height. So we want to show like a ring here. It would be a circle behind this one, right? So we want to make this bigger so that the ring shows up basically. And we also want to make this full flex shrink 0. But this would be, we don't want to place this on the side now that we have like 2 circles, this one and the bigger one. Instead, we want to place that absolute and behind this like main circle. So that's why z index is smaller. And okay, so if we save this, we're gonna see this kind of covers the other one. But if we do some blur, then we get that effect that I'm talking about. Kind of like a shadow, but in a way that it also reflects different colors. It's not just like a same color shadow. After those circles, we're gonna add the line that I mentioned, and this line should only show up if we are not on the last item. So that would be not this one. So if not last item, then we're gonna do, so this line should be behind both of this. So it would have the smallest z-index, position, absolute, top, we're gonna do 2, and width would be 1. As for background, let's do gray 400, flex grow, and height full. So it should stretch all the way from one circle to another circle, and because we pushed it out from the top, it fully covers from one milestone to another. Okay, great. Let's wrap this 2 in a different flag. So this would be, let's add a margin to the left side. If we save this, we have some space in there. So for this one, I'm gonna do text XL, font would be bold. And for the description, let's do margin at the top to text gray 600. Have a roadmap section, we can move on to the feature section. And for the list of the features, we are going to save that inside the data, creating another file, naming it features.js. This file will contain a features array, and we're gonna export that features. So I'll paste what I have written in here, and each of the item would have a title and the description, both of which will show up on like this feature cards. And now creating a new component, let's name this features section. At the top, I'm going to import the data that we just created. That would be from data folder and then features, and let's create the component features section. This we're gonna have a return div. Let's do export default, and inside the div I'm gonna add a subtitle. So this would be something that describes what I guess the product is about and the features around it. And let's do class name, font extra bold, then we're gonna have text 3XL, margin at the bottom would be 8, and padding at the top would be 3. First, let's import that into our app. And add it in the end. So we can see this, we can go back and update some styling. We're gonna create another div where we're gonna display features in a grid format. So this would be features.map feature index. Then we're going to have, let's see, we don't have image. Okay, so that looks right. And I'm gonna remove this extra div. So we have just the list title, I guess, followed by description. And let's modify that. First, we're gonna turn this parent container into a grid. So class name equals to add some margin at a top. Then we're gonna have grid. Items, we want that centered, and now let's define how many columns it's gonna have. So by default it would be 1, so for smaller screens, and then gapped, let's do 3. For the larger screens, we're gonna display 3 columns per row, so that would be columns 3, and then max width would be screen XL, just like we have with other sections. So if I move this now, we have this 3 per row, and then on a smaller screen we have 1 per row. Okay, for the one parent, I guess, up, we can do this flex items center, so we have also the name in the center. And some padding, as we saw on smaller screen, it stretches all the way. Justify, center, and flex direction column. Let's save that. Okay, that looks better. What else we want to do here inside the div? Let's see what we have. Okay, space X sounds good. Flex item, I'm going to add a background white. Border color, let's do indigo, but the indigo shade would be 400, and then opacity 30. Rounded corners, and as well shadow and some padding. That would be 6. So if we see the progress here, and let's do height full so it doesn't look. And in terms of items, I'm gonna remove the center piece so it gets pushed up. Okay, that looks better. Font, let's make this bold so it's different from the other one. For the feature name, actually we don't have name, I believe we have a title. That's why it's not showing up at all. Cool, text XL and text gray 500, that sounds good. Let's add a tagline above like the main header, and we're going to create a separate component for that because we're also going to use it in other sections, for example, the pricing. So in the new file inside components, we create a file named tagline. The component name is also a tagline. It's a very simple component. It will take in the children and add some styling and display the children. So okay, let's return a div, not to forget adding children here, and we can do export default. As for the styling, let's capitalize all the letters. So that would be class name called capitalized, and the text color we are going to do indigo 600. As for the size, that would be 3 pixels. So if I go back to feature section, import this tagline from tagline file, and add that in here, that says features. So that's how it's looking like. As for the content of the feature section, the content that I added here, that's for a project that I built, which is like an AI form builder. It lets you describe what you're looking for, and it'll generate a form for you, which you can later on share and collect results. So if you want to check that out, I have a video tutorial on my channel page, and you can see the link in the description as well. Part would be testimonials. Testimonials are really important for your product and the landing page, so users visiting and getting to know about what you offer have also the kind of social proof that other people's experience have been positive. And for the testimonials, I will be using like users' names and also their profiles, but since I don't have any actual users, I'm just building a landing page. I would use like images that I have generated, and I use generating this using a ChatGPT. And if you want to use those images, I'll also link them in the description. But yeah, that's like different kinds of images that we have, and this is kind of what it generated, and I updated a little bit. Okay, so every image is like a separate user. And now that we have, it's in the public folder where I put it, in the testimonials folder. So having that added that, we can create a new component, new file, testimonials section.jsx. Let's import a tagline. Oh. And testimonials section return. Yeah, actually we can do a section, close this out and export default. So inside here, we're gonna have a tagline that says testimonials. And we're also going to have a subheader. Instead of customers, we can say what builders, considering this is used by people who are building things, say about us. Okay, for text, let's do 3 Excel and then margin at the top. We're going to change that to 3, margin at the bottom 8. Let's add that in here. Okay, and also including that in our JSX, so it shows up. Okay, so that's the header and our description. We're gonna create a separate div for this, which would be of display grid, and inside the grid we're gonna have actually 2 grids. So the outer grid would be to display 3 columns, and inside every column we're gonna have also display grid, if that makes sense. So let's do the first column, this would also be grid, and the gap would be 4 in this one. As for the main one, this would be a bigger gap. Let's do 8, and by default we're gonna show a 1 item per column and then 1 row per column, and then on the larger we're gonna show 3 of them. Also items, let's make that center, and we're gonna set max width screen XL, just like we did with the other sections. The text inside the cards would be aligned on the left side. Okay, now let's create, we can't really see any changes since we don't have any content inside the grid, but now let's create the first grid. So this would be a card that has a border. We're gonna make the corners rounded. Background, let's do white, just with the 20% opacity. Backdrop blur large. And as for the padding, let's do 6. Okay, so if I add a closing tag and user, so this is where the name will show up, and then also above the name we can add an image, the source of which would be Testimonials folder. It would be one, I have PNG. Okay, rounded full. So if we remove rounded full, it's going to show it in square, which is the original shape of the image. But if we add this back, we are going to have a circle, which in my opinion, it looks nicer. Okay, as for the width and height, I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. So let's do 12. And as for the alt text, that would also be user image. We can add and better describe. Okay, now let's show this user and image side by side. We can make that flags and also some space in between. So space X3, margin bottom, we're gonna add 4. Enter, save that. Great. Now below the image and the user, we're gonna have actual testimonial of the user. So that would be a paragraph tag. In here, I'm gonna paste the text that I have in a span. That would be this text right here. Let's see that. Okay, alignment looks good. As for the font size, let's do small one and then space Y4. Now we are gonna have, as I mentioned, 3 columns. So I'm gonna add the class for the second one, and that one would also be grid and gap 4. And if we duplicate that, that would be the all 3, and we can start adding cards to this. So we can also do it 3 times and then update the content of this. So for example, the image, which I have up to 9 images, and then the text of this column, I'll add 1 more card. So that's the 3rd one in here. Updating the image path. And okay, so we're done with this column. Now for this one, it would be also 3 cards. So you can just copy this. You just have to change the text content if you'd like to. So pasting what I have for the next row. Okay. And we have 1 more here. And with that, this is the result we get. And the reason we just didn't do a regular column, only 1 grid container, and then just mapping out the cards, is that the cards have different heights because of the different amount of text inside them. So in that case, we would have every card having like a same height. Compared to here, we have more like an image gallery style layout, and that looks nicer, so we don't have like any extra space inside the card. Let's update the alignment of the testimonials tagline here, and we can change the display of the section, make it flex items in the center. Also, let's do justify center and flex direction column. That should fix it. Now we can move on to the pricing section, where we're going to display information about different kinds of subscriptions, their prices, and a button to select that subscription. And since we have a lot of information per, I guess, subscription, let's create a separate pricing JS file that will be inside data folder. Here we are going to have a pricing plans array that will contain all the information that I just mentioned. So every item would have a title. Let's do free plan, and we have price, which I'm gonna turn that into a number instead, a description, and a features array. So usually the basic, you include almost every feature that you have there, and then the other, as you go on the right, there's more advanced plans, and they're expected to include all these features that a basic plan has. But I guess, yeah, varies on the product. So I'll do like 3 of those, and I'll add also another feature, which is whether or not if it's popular, and it would have like we're gonna mark the popular ones in the UI. Paste the other 2, not to type it out, but yeah, it's following the same structure. This is for a hobby plan, which has way more forms, also data expert, conditional, and then finally we have a pro plan, and then the middle one would be the true for is popular or not. Okay, let's create a component now. That would be for the card that would display the plan. So new file plan card.jsx, and we'll take in all the information about the plan, which is price, title, description, features, and is popular. What we're gonna do after is take this data and display it. All right, so I'm gonna create an outer div first. Class name, this would be for the card itself. Inside here, let's say if it is popular, display a tag of the popular. Next, we have another div where we're gonna have the section for the price, which would be the main header. And another one for, like, this is monthly prices, right? So I'll add a span that says per month. Okay, for now, let's just take this and take the data and combine it, display it in those cards. And where that would happen would be a pricing section. All right, let's import pricing plans from data pricing, and then we have plan card. Update this. mapping out the pricing plans. And so this, we don't need to, so the names are matching exactly, so we don't need to really pass it separately like that. We can just like take the plan object and destructure it. So here we're missing the closing curly bracket, and let's save export default, add that into app.js. Take that, put it below pricing testimonials. Save it. So we have all the prices here. Now let's start making changes to the cards. But before we go to the cards, let's make the pricing section flex, and we can also add a tagline here to indicate what this section is about. So tagline from tagline. Okay, we have that. Let's add that here. Pricing. And a subheader. This would be something more explanation, I guess. All right, that's there. We're gonna change the styling of this header to the font would be extra bold, text 3XL, margin at the bottom 8, and padding at the top 3. Now changing the display of the main container, we're gonna make it flex, text center, padding, let's do 10, items, also center, justify as well, and flex direction column. Kind of similar as we had for the parent container of the other one. Okay, so now we have that. Let's display these cards in a grid. So I'm gonna take this grid, margin top would be 10, items. We have center by default. Grid columns would be 1. Let's do gap 3, and on the margin, do grid columns 3. Okay, I'm gonna save this, and that's our cards. On to the plan card styling. First, we're gonna align this to show up on the same side. So that would be the price and the month div, and inline display inline flex. Also items, let's align towards the end. So now we have those aligned, and let's update the color of the styling for the text. So price, we're gonna make it look more like emphasized, so let's do font extra bold, and text would be 3XL. As for the month, I'll move it so we can see. That would be adding a margin to the left, text gray 500, and align. So now it's on the side, so we always want to keep it at the bottom. And below this price, let's add the name of the plan. So in another div, actually we don't need to create div, we can just add it in the header. So this would be title goes here. Then comes styling, font bold, and we have text Excel, adding some margin on the top and the bottom. So this popular is down, but we're gonna fix that. So it would be all balanced out and this information on the same row. So we're gonna follow up this with a description. And a line to separate this information with the features. So adding the line, we don't really have to add anything in the div. It would add the border, and that will create a line effect. So border either at the top or the bottom. We can do the color of it to be gray, and let's do 400. Opacity, we don't want it to be too fully opaque, and margin 3 on the sides. Okay, so that's our border, and just in case, make sure it's always full width. So flex grow added on that, and here we can create now after that an unordered list where we are going to take the features and map them out. So this would be features, map feature. We're going to take the index, and we're going to take list item key equals the index. For the class name, let's add another div inside where we are going to have a paragraph. We're also going to add an icon on the side and display the feature. So that's our features list. As for the icon, we are going to be using a check from Lucid React. So I'm gonna add that here. Okay, now adding the icon before the feature. Okay, for the size, let's do 10, and for the class name, text white, and let's put it in a circle. We can actually use this div for the circle, so I'm taking out the paragraph. And for class name, so if you want this to show up as a circle that has a check inside, the width and height should be larger. So let's do 4 for that and set a background. This would be indigo 500 and rounded full to get the shape of the circle. Okay, so we have a circle and the check mark inside. We want this to be centered. So let's do flex items center, justify also center, and that should do it. Okay, it seems very small, so let's, instead of the size, do 3, and same for this. And for the list items, we are also going to do this one, flex direction would be row, item center, text of the features, like let's make that gray 700, gap in between features, and margin on top and the bottom would be 2. So this one, I don't know why it's still not centered. Oh, maybe because we have margin on the right. Okay, so we have this, and then we can add a button below. So we have a div and the button that says select plan. Let's save that. So we have like the text here. For this one, we're also going to do background indigo 500, and then padding Y would be 2, margin at the top, let's do 3, some rounded corners which would be large. As for text color, so it shows up on indigo, white, and width, let's do full, otherwise it would be smaller, and full looks better. On hover, let's make it darker, or actually lighter. I think that's too light. Okay, that's better. As for the main plan card component, we're gonna do border, flex column. So justify between so that all these buttons are pushed down all the way. So the features, because they're different, there might be different features, it could have different height. So yeah, background white, only 20% opacity, backdrop blur, and we're gonna do a large, rounded, also large, height would be full, some padding around, which is 6. And let's add the shadow on the hover. So that would be shadow. We can do size medium, and text always aligned on the left. And I'm gonna add relative because we're gonna make this popular tag here absolute positioned according to its parent container, which is that. Okay, so that's our hover effect, and let's fix the popular. As I mentioned, this would be absolute. So we want it to be like some distance from the top. So let's do top 6, from the left 0. If I save this, so that's where it is. And then we're gonna do background indigo 500, text white, padding X2, padding Y1, rounded at the top. So it kind of like sits on top of our card right here. And let's make this extend fully. And text centered, because right now it is on to the left. All right, and that's the end result. One more final thing that we're gonna add on this page is going to be a footer. It will just be like a simple footer showing the copyright data. So footer.jsx, let's create a component that equals to, and we export defaultly. We use the HTML footer tag inside the paragraph here. I'll update that to be current date. Then we have company name. Cool. Let's place that into our app file. Import footer from components footer, and we're gonna put that all the way in the end. All right, let's do some styling. So class name, I'm gonna do text center, add some padding. Text color, let's do gray 600, and let's make text a little bit larger, so LG. All right, that looks better. We can also do border on the top, a background white with this, and with a lower opacity, and backdrop blur large, or we can do pixel. All right, I'm gonna add a little bit of margin as well. So we have more space. All right, and let's also add links here. So we have the two sections from here, the features and the pricing. And to do that, I'm gonna close out the other part. So actually, let's turn this into a section. And if we do ID pricing, and same thing to the features section. ID equals features, then we'll be able to reference the sections using like a link, which would be hash followed by the ID name. So if we were to go back to the navbar and update that and do like pricing, and same for the features. Save that and test it out. So we end up here, and then that's where our features are. All right, let's test the mobile view one more time, make sure everything looks good. So that's our hero section. Those are our partner logos. Then we have a roadmap followed by features. Let's make this centered on like the smaller screen. That would look better. So by default, we're gonna do text center, and then on larger screens, text. Oh, we have that centered on both actually. All right, and the padding seems to be a little bit too large. So let's do margin at the bottom, maybe 4, and larger screens, that would be 8. All right. Testimonials, let's add some paddings here. Padding 6. All right, pricing looks good, and then we have the footer. So that's it for this tutorial. Hopefully you enjoy building out this landing page, and write down in the comments what is your SaaS product, or I'm also planning to do a tutorial where I use the landing page to build out a full SaaS. So let me know in the comments if you have any ideas of what I should build in that tutorial. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.